So, good morning, students. In today's video, we are going to cover this concept, that is modern concept. So, in previous video, we have covered the dualistic concept in which two stars are included in the formation of solar system. But now, from today's onward, we will see the hypothesis under the modern concept. So, the Nova hypothesis of Hoyle and Littleton. It is proposed by Fred Hoyle and Littleton of Cambridge University in 1946. And the main idea is heavy elements in the universe are formed inside supernova stars through nuclear fission. So, this hypothesis was proposed by Fred Hoyle and Littleton. In 1946. Okay, and the main idea of this Nova hypothesis is heavy elements in the universe are formed inside supernova stars through nuclear fusion. So the heavy elements, okay, though the heavy elements that are present in the universe are formed inside these supernova stars through nuclear fusion. So nuclear fusion is a process through which heavy elements in the supernova stars are formed. So we will look at what is this nuclear fusion mean and the supernova stars, how they are formed, etc. in the upcoming slides. When light atoms join together, so now we will discuss about the process of nuclear fusion. When light atoms join together to form heavy atoms, a process called nuclear fusion happens. So two light atoms join and they combine and they form the heavier atom. Okay, and this process is called the nuclear fusion. So here fuse. Two light atoms fuse together to form a heavy atom. Okay, in nuclear fusion, two light atoms combine. Yes, their combined mass became slightly less than the total mass of the two atoms before joining. So that means if suppose this is an atom and this is another atom, its mass is 12 and its mass is 14. So when you combine it, what you will get? 26. Okay, so but like this mass gets reduced when you combine these two atoms and make a single atom. So why this and the total mass of this is less than the 26 mass, that is the addition of the separate masses of these two atoms. Okay, so why does that happen? Why is the combined mass is lesser than the individual, adding the individual masses of these atoms? We will look this in the upcoming slides. This missing mass is converted into energy. So this missing mass means the maybe like 26 is the mass that we get when we combine the masses of these individual atoms. Now if we see the combined mass is 24, so where does the 2 kilo, we can say the 2 digits of mass, where does that go? So it converts into energy, that the mass is converted into the energy. And sorry, but we don't measure masses of atoms in kilo. So that 2 units of mass is converted into energy. This energy is very huge because even a tiny amount of mass converts into a very large amount of energy. This happens due to Einstein's equation E is equals to mc square. So what it says that the 2 unit of mass is converted into energy. So this is a very, means 2 units is a very, very small amount of mass, but it converts into a huge amount of energy. And why does this happen? Because if we see this equation is equals to mc square, so here the mass is multiplied by the c square, and the speed of light is 3 into 10 to the power 8 some meter per second, something like that. So the square of this into mass, that becomes a very huge digit. Oops, that becomes a very large digit, and this whole is converted into the energy. So that's why the mass is very little amount, but the energy, when it is converted into energy, huge amount of energy is released. Simple idea: small mass converted into big energy means lot of amount of energy. Fusion inside supernova stars is extremely powerful, releases enormous energy. So these fusion happens in these supernova stars. Okay, and these this is extremely powerful. Means extremely powerful. Why? Because lot enormous amount of energy is released. As we have seen, why the enormous amount of energy is released. Why is combined mass less than individual masses? Now look at this particular question, that why the combined mass is less than the individual masses. When two light atoms combine to form a heavier atom, some mass is used up to create a strong binding force that holds the new nucleus together. So what happens? Why the combined mass is lesser than the adding the individual masses of the atoms? Just because when these converted into a single heavier atom, so some of the mass is used to create a strong binding force that will hold together these atoms. So some of the mass is used up in that to hold the atoms in the new nucleus together. When two things join tightly, energy is needed to hold them together. In atoms, this holding force is called the nuclear binding energy. This binding energy comes from a small part of mass. So this nuclear binding energy, where does it come from? From the mass. As we have seen that these individual atoms, when they combine together, some of the mass is converted into this binding energy. So that's why mass reduced. Okay, and energy is, you know of course, it's has no mass, so the mass reduced because that mass is converted into energy, nuclear binding energy, that is holding the atoms in the nucleus together. So what happens? A small amount of mass gets used up or converted into the binding energy. Because that mass is turned into energy, the final nucleus has slightly less mass than the total mass of the two separate particles. That's what I have taught you here. In short, mass is lost because it gets converted into energy needed to bind the nucleus together. So some mass is lost when we are making the heavy atom, because that small mass is converted into the binding energy for the new nucleus. Formation of the heavy elements. So now come back to our nova hypothesis. Light atoms combine under very high heat and pressure. So where do we have left? So we have left in this that the nuclear fusion happens in the supernova stars, and because of that heavy elements are formed. So light atoms combine under very high heat and pressure. This produces heavy elements and releases a huge amount of energy. So because of this, heavy elements formed and it releases huge amount of energy. Why does this happen? We have already covered in the previous slides. Heavy elements make up 90% of the mass of planets. So the mass of the planets in that 90% of is made up of heavy elements. Difference between stars and planets. Stars contain mostly hydrogen. So the star contain mostly hydrogen. Planets contain very little hydrogen, less than 1%. So star contain a huge amount of hydrogen. But the planets contain very little hydrogen, less than 1%, and the planets are made up of heavy elements. Formation of heavy elements need high temperature. So ordinary stars like the sun can only form helium by burning hydrogen. So how does a sun the ordinary type of ordinary star like sun form? They form by burning hydrogen that form helium. To form heavier elements, extremely high temperature is needed. This temperature is found only in the supernova stars. So to form the heavier elements, lot of amount of temperature is needed, high amount of energy is needed, and that is only present in the supernova stars, because as we have seen that supernova stars undergoes nuclear fusion. How a star becomes a supernova? When a star runs out of hydrogen, it shrinks to produce energy. So now we will see that how does the supernova star forms. When the star runs out of hydrogen, because stars are mainly made up of hydrogen, as we have seen, and the planets are made up of heavier elements. Okay, so when the star runs out of hydrogen, because it has a shortage of hydrogen, what happens? It shrinks, it decreases in size, and that mass is converted into energy. Because it shrinks, so its mass decreases, and that mass is converted into energy. Because of that, huge amount of energy is released. Okay, shrinking increases its speed of rotation. Due to high speed, it throws out. So because of that shrinking, because of the decrease in size, it started to rotate fast, because it has lower mass. Due to high speed, it throws lighter matter first, then heavier matter. So because of the high speed in which it is rotating, it throws out the lighter matter first and then the heavier. This explosion is called supernova. So this explosion where it started to throw out lighter elements and then heavier elements, this explosion is called supernova. Formation of the solar system. According to this hypothesis, a supernova exploded near the sun. So now we will see that how does the solar system form. We have seen everything. like how does the new supernova formed, what does means, and what is nuclear fusion, things like that. Now we will come back to the hypothesis, which explain us the formation of solar system. A supernova exploded near the sun. So this supernova star is exploded near the sun. The explosion produced intense heat and pressure. Because of that, huge amount of heat is released and pressure. Matter thrown out from the explosion formed a disk around the sun. So the this is the supernova star, this is the sun. So the matter thrown out during the explosion of supernova made a disk around the sun. Planets, including the Earth, were formed by condensation of this disk matter. So, after the cooling down and the condensation of this disk around the sun, the planets started to form. Okay. Critical analysis. So now we have seen that how the solar system formed according to the nova hypothesis. So critical analysis means the criticism that this hypothesis received does not explain the origin of the pair of stars, sun and supernova star. So it does not explain the origin of the pair of stars, like where does these sun and supernova star come in this space out of nowhere. Fails to explain the arrangement and motion of planets, their rotation, revolution, sizes, and constituent elements. So it doesn't give us the full description of the arrangement of the solar system, why the heavier and the large planets are in the middle while the smaller ones are at the ends, and why they rotate, some are rotate fast, some rotate slowly, their sizes, etc. They don't give information about that. And lastly, that's it for the topic. And today's homework is to make a diagram or a flowchart explaining this concept. And that's it for this video. If you have any doubt related to this topic, you can comment freely. I will definitely gonna answer all your doubts. Thanks for watching.
Link from Hubter.